Okay, so the class was interested, the class,
Justin.
no, the class, the objects in the classes. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, the class was interested in classes. And so I'm going to talk about classes. So, um, classes are a very important part of programming. Classes contain variables and functions. And so each of these tables from the Excel spreadsheet, it's reading in tables, is going into an array. And then I'm going to use that array to populate each class object. So the first object I make is called T. I named it T. And T is based on the tipping class. And tipping in, it's the data from the tipping array that I want to use based on the name. So we're going to read in the cotton row. Okay, so that's what's going to be in tipping, all the data for the cotton row in the tipping spreadsheet. Okay, so how does a class work? These are the classes. So here's the class tipping. And what I do is I read in the data from the spreadsheet. And because I'm only using one record, I'm saying ilog0.ilog0. So that means it's a lot of times you read in data from spreadsheets and it'll read in two variables, the index and the variable. So you have to, I don't understand it real well, but you have to read it in so it reads the right variable. But anyway, this class contains these variables. Classes can also contain functions. So this nitrogen class contains all these variables from the spreadsheet, but also contains certain functions like fertilization, mineralization. So anytime I make an object based on the class, I'm getting all those variables and all the functions in the class. Okay, you don't really need to know this for the assignment, but since we're using classes, you might as well know this. And it's actually really important when you program. To program, it's called object-oriented programming. You have objects with certain attributes, and the attributes are defined by the class. Okay, so up here, I made an object called T based on the tipping class and the cotton record, because I gave the tipping name cotton, so it'll read the row from that spreadsheet labeled cotton. Okay, I have another object called S based on the soil class. So it reads in all the data for the layers for that soil. So soil set 1 or soil set 2. So that's my soil name. Where does my soil name come from? It comes from the tipping class because I define the soil name in the tipping spreadsheet. So all I have to do is take t.soil name, and soil name is one of the variables in the tipping spreadsheet. Not necessarily the tipping spreadsheet, but in the tipping class. Notice when I read variables into the class, in the spreadsheet, it's labeled time step days, but I just named it DT. The time step is DT for my coding. The reason is I don't want these really long names in my code because they'll just make the lines really long. So I give it a shorter name, like max dissolved salinity. I give it the name max S. So I have enough information to know what it is, but not so much information that it's going to take a lot of space on the line. Okay, so then the soils class, I'm reading in arrays because the soils class has arrays, has information for each layer. So what it'll do is my soil in, it's everything with that soil layer set name. So remember, there's like maybe 10 rows with the same soil layer set name. It'll read all those in. So that's what this is for. It takes out of this spreadsheet or the table only the information you want. And so I make a soil object based on the soil class that I defined in the WINS spreadsheet. And by the way, you have to run the WINS spreadsheet with all the classes first before you run this code. Otherwise, it doesn't know what these are, soil. So if you get an error message like there's no name tipping, well, it's because you didn't run the WINS classes cell first that is below. Okay, same thing with daily. So I have the daily class. And so I take like maybe 365 days of weather data with that. So this daily in is just the weather data from that weather day, the daily set name, like daily 1, daily 2, daily 3. And then nitrogen in is for the nitrogen set name that I had noticed it's in T. All these are in T. So the tipping bucket, the tipping spreadsheet defines all the soils, weather, nitrogen name that I want. Okay. So D is daily. And then you can start to use your objects like D and T, and it keeps it really organized that, you know, this is my date in D, and this is my planting date in T. So I'm defining my start date and end date. And also I'm having a start index, so I'm going to start my D dot date. Even though I start maybe January 1st, it's going to start April 20th if that's the right start date. So it adjusts that. And you know, I have other certain changes I'm making to some of these based on, you know, whether I have the sufficient data or not. Here's the irrigation data. And by the way, I just wanted to explain how you adjust the irrigations. I don't think I explained it very well before. Okay. So all these sections, this would be like if you were dividing your field into 20 sections, like 20 distances down the furrow, which might get slightly different amounts of water. So these might be fractions of one, but the numbers that you have to change are the reference millimeters. We're only using section 1 for this code. We're just assuming there's only one irrigation location. And so you're going to change the reference millimeters and then the day of year that you're irrigating. So that's what you have to focus on changing. And also that you're doing it for the right irrigation number, you know, like in the tipping bucket spreadsheet, and also the irrigation name, actually, in the tipping bucket spreadsheet, we're basing our irrigation tape, the information we're selecting from the irrigation table based on the irrigation set name, not the number. Okay, so you'll have to make sure that you either specify a new name or pick the right name in the irrigation spreadsheet. So for instance, if you're doing, I don't think we have one for cotton. But we have for alfalfa, we have broccoli. So I think you have to set up one for cotton. Yeah. So you'll have to pick some dates and so on. And then, so these are the days of year corresponding with the dates. And this is the depth of irrigation per irrigation. Okay. So, now if tipping name equals alfalfa, so that's going back up here to where we define the name of our crop. That's really the record in the tipping spreadsheet. So if it's alfalfa, then it uses certain it uses the alfalfa spreadsheet to define the C array or the C object. And so I have different algorithms for alfalfa because there's many cuttings. And then the C object is defined here for cotton. And then you can see that when we're starting to make equations, we can use things like S dot depth, T dot num layers, C dot KCB, D dot ET0. So you see everything's organized based on their objects, and it makes it really easy to keep things straight, separated, and so on. So I just wanted to explain, that's the purpose of using classes. It just enables organization and separation of things into different places. It makes it a lot easier to program.